How do you apply for tenure and or promotion with confidence when so much of the process seems uncertain? What if the biggest obstacle to a successful application isn't your record, but the story you're telling about it? Hey, co-authors. In this episode, we explore one of the most significant milestones in an academic career, applying for tenure and or promotion. The process is a deeply personal moment where years of work, identity, and professional aspirations converge. We'll examine why the process feels so overwhelming, why confidence often erodes during the process, and practical strategies for approaching your dossier with clarity, preparation, and trust. So let's dive in. Whenever I first started at my job here at the University of Northern Iowa, I had no idea what it meant to get tenure. I knew that it was something I was supposed to get. I knew that I was on the tenure track, or I was tenure eligible, however your institution calls it. But any of the actual ways of doing that, I had no idea about what I was supposed to do. I think that I just assumed that what was going to happen was I was going to have my normal teaching evaluations. The university was going to keep those because they're the ones who proctored them anyway. I was going to publish things. I would show what those publications were, maybe give someone the article or just my CV. And then, for service, it would just be like, are you participating in the department or the university enough? And if you do something bigger than that, then that's kudos to you. But otherwise, it's just kind of do your thing. But friends, the sheer amount of bureaucratic nonsense that went into this still astounds me in terms of how much my institution asks us to document what we're doing in order for us to obtain tenure. I feel like I'm spending as much time documenting my work as it is that I'm doing the actual work, right? So whenever I started, we didn't even have electronic files. We had to do everything by paper. You had these 3 big binders for your teaching, service, and research, but you couldn't add anything or take anything out of those files except for certain times of the year. So you couldn't keep up with them throughout the year. Instead, you could only access them in certain times because the university technically owned them. We didn't. And even anything that you put in there, once it was put in there, you couldn't take it back out. So there was a 4th folder that was filled with all of the documents that no longer were current. So if I put a CV in there for year 1, next year, whenever I put in my CV for year 2 with all my updated information, I couldn't just remove the first CV. I had to put that in the old files folder. You had student evaluations, which you had to request. Even though the university already had those, you had to request those from the department and then print them out and then put them into your file. You had peer observations. You had to put in sample syllabi and sample assignments. For your research, you had to not only put in the piece that you had published, but also what the outlet was, how good the outlet was. You had to do all that information digging yourself. It was just an ongoing laborious nightmare in terms of all the stuff that you had to put together. Because again, the entire time I'm thinking, I thought I was just going to hand you my CV every year. And then if you had a question, institution, you were going to ask me about that. Oh, you published this piece. It's not in a traditional journal. Tell us a little bit about why this should count as your scholarship. Or, oh, you took some students to a conference. Tell us a little bit more about that. I didn't think I was going to have to document every single thing. Then I find out this is actually not the thing that everyone does at every institution, that there's a variety of ways, both even more torturous than my process and some that were thankfully far, far less. And again, I felt like, going through my doc program and obtaining a tenure track job, no one mentored me and said, okay, this is what you're going to have to do, or these are things that you should look out for, or, regardless of institution or type, these are things that they might expect from you. No one had that conversation with me. I learned all of this on the job and through trial and error every year by sending in my materials and then having my tenure committee tell me what was good, bad, or indifferent about my file, and then trying to fix that for the next year. So what I thought I'd talk about today was whether your institution has tenure, whether it has promotion, whether it has tenure and promotion. You probably have an ongoing document that you should be keeping up with and giving to your institution every year, every 3 years, or whatever it might be. So I thought that I'd talk a little bit about this process in order for you to prepare for the eventual time for you to turn in your tenure and or promotion file. Okay, so let's dive in. Are you interested in mastering scholarly writing, developing productivity, and increasing impact, all while staying healthy? Then welcome to the Publishing Academic Research Podcast. My name is Dr. Kyle Ruddick, and I'm a full professor and writing coach who's dedicated to making sure you break through whatever is stopping you from reaching your scholarly goals. I meet so many scholars who have creative, innovative, and daring ideas, but can never seem to get those projects from proposals to print. I want you to get your work in the hands of people who will read it and appreciate it. So let's get into this week's big idea. I think that before I get into the reasons why I think that this is a problem, one of the things that I want to reiterate here is that the overall problem with this is that A, institutions have a variety of ways in which tenure and or promotion is assessed, and B, our doc programs largely do not prepare us for what this process should look like or even does look like at the institution that you're at. Right? None of my faculty in my doctoral program sat me down and said, okay, this is what it takes to get tenure here. This is what I had to do. This is how I had to do it. That entire process was completely opaque to all of us. And as a result, then, whenever you get into these spaces, if you're very lucky like I was, you have good colleagues. I had a couple of senior colleagues who kind of took it on themselves to help out and to sort of mentor us along the way. But I know a lot of faculty that were hired at or around the same time that I was that were not so lucky. They had departments that did not have senior faculty who were willing to do that, or they had senior faculty who were actively trying to sabotage them. And so all of this opacity and uncertainty gets offloaded onto you as the individual, right? Like, because at the end of the day, the university, it has its structure and it is up to you to either meet that structure or not. And if you don't, then you don't get tenure or promotion and you might even get drummed out of your job. Certainly that's happened in my time here. We had a faculty member who didn't do what they were supposed to do, ended up going to a vote for the faculty. Faculty overwhelmingly voted to not give them tenure, and now they're no longer in academia. So it does happen, right, that people don't get tenure because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And in some cases, that's because they don't know what they're supposed to do. And so that's what I want to address is making sure that you all, if you're an early career faculty, or maybe you're a doctoral student now, or if you're a master's student and you're thinking about maybe one day being a professor, like I want to talk about how this process manifests so that way you can start being prepared for it. So then what are some problems then with this process? So first off, as I've been saying, the tenure process, it's opaque. And I think in some ways it's opaque by design, right? Like it's in the institution's benefit and in your department's benefit on some level for you to feel uncertain. Because if you feel uncertain, if you don't really know what the criteria are, if you don't really have a clear sense of what you're supposed to do in order to obtain tenure or promotion, that ambiguity always benefits the institution. If someone says to you, you need to have 4 publications in quartile 1 journals by the time you go up for tenure, that's pretty clear cut. That's very easy. If someone says, well, you could have a couple of publications in good journals and then a couple more in like not so great journals, or maybe handbook chapters count, but not as much as an article, and a textbook's good, but it's not quite an article, and a grant. Well, if a grant's really, really big, that's better than an article. Like all of that ambiguity, right, doesn't serve you, because what you're looking for is, what do I need to do in order for me to keep my job? That is the bottom line for you. So this lack of clarity, right, this opacity that's around this is to your detriment, right? And again, the institution is in some ways loath to fix that because that ambiguity, that opacity serves it and not you. A second reason why this tenure promotion process is hard for faculty is because a lot of us undervalue our work. And the reason for that is because a lot of the work that we do is invisible. And so you're faced with a choice on either documenting every little thing that you do, which becomes, again, laborious and exhausting, much like my process, right? So every time that you take a student to a conference, every time that you get invited to talk to someone else's class, every time that you give a presentation for a local nonprofit, every one of those has to be documented. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm a good teacher, or I do good service, or I do good research. You have to document every one of those things. We undervalue our work. And so as a result, that means that we have to document every single little thing. On the other hand, what ends up happening is you don't document that stuff, and then it ends up not counting. So you might think to yourself, well, I got my evaluations back. I'm a good teacher. No, my friend, right? Do you have your syllabi? Do you have sample assignments? Have you done any professional development training? Have you gone to any conferences and then talked explicitly about teaching? Have you had a student write you a nice thank you note at the end of the semester? Like all of these things that you think to yourself, this is just, run-of-the-mill good teaching, right? All that stuff becomes invisible. Service is the same way, right? Like you're always on committees. You're always serving your department and your university. You're always doing committee work. You might think to yourself, why would I write that into my CV? Why would I write that into my dossier whenever I'm just running from meeting to meeting all the time? And even like research can get that way, right? Like you write something, it gets published. The first time that you publish a journal article or the first time that you publish a book chapter, you might be like, oh, I'm ecstatic. I've done this huge thing. It's so great. I'm published now. I'm a published author. By the time it's your third, fourth, or fifth thing, you think to yourself, okay, yeah, like another chapter. That's cool. Right. And so you don't really crow about it and you don't really celebrate yourself in your dossier the same way that you might have in year one. All this is to say that all of these types of labor are usually cumulative, right? They're small acts that are going across all of the time that you're in the institution. And we oftentimes forget all the little things that we do. The third reason that there's a problem with this tenure and promotion process is because a lot of us engage in academic comparison. And we've talked about this before. There's an episode on it. But a lot of this comes from this idea that even if you are a perfectly adequate member of your department, then that means that you're somehow not good because you have this other colleague and they're a superstar and their lab is awesome and they get all the grants and they have all the student advisees and they have all the publications. And so you must not be a good member. And that comparison really can eat away at you and make you not want to celebrate yourself in your dossier and not really talk about your accomplishments because they seem to be so small compared to what the rock star colleague in your department is. And a lot of this in turn leads to a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-assessment, a lot of self-denigration because we end up thinking of ourselves as not being productive members of the department. But the thing is like the institution is not looking for a department full of rock stars. I mean, that's not really realistic. But if you have ever had to work with those types of rock stars, what you'll find is that I'd say people that I interact with that are like really high caliber scholars that are just like, they're doing everything in the world and they've got the tiger by the tail. Like those people typically are miserable people to be around. Like they are terrible people to be around because they have such an ego. They're so hard to deal with. They're so hard to interact with. The idea of having an entire department full of those types of people, it's like nails on a chalkboard, man. Even if that's the level of productivity that you're looking for, that's not the type of person that you want to be. And that's hard for us to process because A, we feel bad about ourselves and our accomplishments, but also this person who's also kind of a jerk seems to always be around. The final reason that there's a problem with the tenure and promotion process is that for the however many years that you're in your doc program, however many years that you might have been in a non-tenure track position, so adjuncting or in a term or set contract hire or whatever they call them at your institution, however long that you've been in those different types of roles, now you're in this tenure track position and it feels like the stakes are just enormous. And so tenure, especially I think, because it's still kind of held in this esteem, but any type of promotion really can affect our identity and how we value ourselves, our sense of stability, whether we think that this is the type of institution that you want to stay at and build a career at. It affects our sense of belonging, whether or not we feel appreciated and seen, not just by our institution, but by our colleagues, by the people in our departments who on some level have some influence over this decision and who read over our materials. All of these things make this an incredibly emotionally fraught position, not to mention the fact that the fear of rejection is also a fear of you not getting to keep your job. So just the small thing of you being able to pay your bills or not, right? Like there's a lot of stuff going on here that this tenure and or promotion dossier is not just a symbolic document. It is a professional trajectory and career document, and one that is really going to set the tone for what type of career that you have at this institution or others. I really don't want to undersell this, right? Like I don't think it does us any good to say, oh, the tenure and or promotion process, oh, don't worry about it. It'll take care of itself. Just do really good work and you'll be fine. At the end of the day, you are crafting an argument to your colleagues, to the committee, to the department head, to the deans, provost, whoever it is, not just recognize your contributions for a set number of years, but to invest in you and to say to you, we see the value that you will bring to the institution, possibly for the rest of your career. And that's a really big deal, both for you and for the institution. So that being the case, what are some ways that you can apply for promotion or tenure with confidence? Now, I will say, one of the big joys that I have now that I am a tenure professor is being asked to be an outside evaluator and an outside letter writer for tenure and promotion cases for faculty across the United States. It is so much fun. I mean, it's really cool. Okay, so A, you get to read other people's research and all the stuff that they're doing, all the awards that they won. And, even if you think that you know a person at another institution, like you know their work, you know who they are, right? Like you don't know all the stuff that they've been doing and all the stuff that they've accomplished. And so getting to take a peek at that point in their career is it's so cool to see how people have developed their scholarship and who they are. But also, and this is probably the debater in me because I did debate whenever I was in high school and in college, there's just something that's just immensely gratifying about reading someone else's work and all the stuff that they've done, taking all of that and then using that as evidence for why they should get tenure and promotion and a raise or whatever it is that an institution does, right? It's such a great feeling to feel like you have such a tangible, immediate benefit to your colleagues because there's so much going on in the world and there's so many ways that our institutions don't serve us. And so the idea that you can advocate for someone else and really help and maybe be the voice that gets them over the hump and gets them to the next level of their career, like that's just a really incredibly rare honor and certainly not one that most jobs in the world have. I can't think of another job where someone else in the same career path but at a different company would come in and evaluate you and write you a good letter of recommendation or write you a letter in some way that's supportive of you. Like that doesn't really happen anywhere else in the economy. So this rare honor is something that you get a chance to really feel like you're supporting other faculty and your colleagues in your discipline and in your field. But whenever that happens, right, I get asked to do that. And so I get to read a lot of different tenure documents, how tenure promotion works at different institutions. And so here's some things that I would say that I look for or that I would suggest whenever you're putting these documents together. First off, I appreciate a strong cover letter from the person applying for tenure and or promotion that has a very clear, coherent professional narrative. And what I mean by that is I want them to tell me what their area of scholarship is. And as it pertains to research, for example, what I'm looking for there is what they see as their area of scholarship, what kind of conversations they want to have in their field of study. So what are their emphasis areas or their concentrations, whatever you want to call it, like what is it specifically within their field of study that they're trying to deal with? And then to what effect that they've had on their field in that area. That could be downloads of their work, citations, the prestige of the journals that they've been publishing in. Like any of those things to me are evidence that you've had an effect on your field in the areas that you are trying to contribute to. If you're submitting this internally, you might think about crafting this in a way that shows how your work fits within a department's mission or the university's mission, right? How your stuff aligns with the greater mission of the institution, how it furthers it, brings prestige to it, how it helps students within the institution, right? All of those things are also good. Whenever I'm an outside reviewer, I care about that less because I'm not really evaluating you as a institution member. I'm evaluating you as a scholar in the discipline. But within your institution, that's certainly an argument that you could make as well. So, whenever, for example, I wrote my tenure and promotion documents, I was like, hey, here's all the stuff that I've published. My concentration area is in communication and education. And so these publications are not just good because they're in good journals and they've been cited and all those things, but also those publications have made me reflect and be a better teacher. And isn't that what you want me to do, university, is to be a good teacher because that's how we serve our students best. So again, whenever I'm writing my letter to my tenure committee or to my dean, provost, and those folks, I make that more university or institutional argument, which was not as present whenever I was writing to an outside reviewer. The second thing that I would say is know what your university or departmental criteria are and map your materials directly to that criteria. So again, if you're writing a cover letter, I would say breaking up your letter into the parts of your job that you are evaluated on. So for us, that is teaching, research, and service. I know that for some folks, right, you might be in a teaching only position. You might not even have a research component. But what's important here is that you are mapping exactly what you're being evaluated on, and then you're addressing those in your cover letter. So your cover letter is speaking to your area of concentration, what you hope to achieve in those areas, and then the metrics that you can use to demonstrate excellence. So we talked about this for research already. For teaching, I want to be a great teacher because I want to use flipped class pedagogy. Why do I want to do that? Well, because flipped class pedagogy has these types of benefits. I feel like it's more egalitarian. It's the type of culture that I want to have with my students. And look at the metrics and you can see how they demonstrate how my flipped class pedagogy is an effective design. My student evaluations are high. My peer evaluations are high. I've won teaching awards, whatever it might be. But using that type of approach of what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are your concentration areas? What is it that you're trying to emphasize? And then how you're contributing to that area, and then to what effect you're contributing to that area is a nice little heuristic as you're working through those things. The third thing that you can do is get feedback from other faculty. I will say that this can be a little hit or miss, right? Because what you don't want to have happen is you ask one of your colleagues to do this. They say, oh, it's great. And then later you find out that either A, they weren't a good person to ask because they're not very well respected, and so their opinion doesn't really carry any weight, or B, that they intentionally give you bad advice because they don't like you or they feel threatened by you or whatever it might be, and so they don't do a good job. So definitely make sure to find someone who's not just willing to read your stuff, but someone who is respected enough to be a good advocate for you if something were to arise. If you don't have anyone like that in your department, then I would encourage you to either A, if your university's tenure and promotion criteria are pretty consistent across all of the academic units, then finding someone outside of your department is an option. Now, for me, for example, at my institution, that would be less useful because all departments get to write our own standards and criteria, in which case what someone needs in English, which is an allied field of mine, could be very different than what the standards and criteria are for my department. So know that if you have consistency there, that would be very strong for you to just find someone in a different department. But if that's not the case, then at that point, whether you find someone in a different department in your university or you find someone who's not even in your university, at that point, it really doesn't matter, right? You just need someone to look at your stuff. And if the standards are so different across your university, there's not really a lot of consistency there, then really any faculty member might do that. So you could ask your PhD advisor if you're still close with them, or a colleague at another university who's gone up for tenure before you have, or even a coach like myself or other folks, if you work with them, to look over your documents, because all of us can read what your standards and criteria are for your university. You can give that to that person and then have them evaluate your file. The last thing that I will say, and I really hate giving this advice because, okay, so whenever I was doing my tenure and promotion file, I really hated documenting everything. Like, it just seems like such a slog and such a stupid thing to have to do to prove my worth to the university. Whenever I felt like anyone who looked at my CV and my evals from my students and from my peers about my teaching, like, that should be enough. Like, why are we making this such a torturous process? So me being me, I decided that I had these tenure dossiers that were the folders, like I was saying. And so I would put in, like, well, they're called Wokemon. They're Pokemon, right? But they have like anti-capitalist and anti-bureaucratic quotes from famous philosophers and famous thinkers. And so I printed a whole bunch of those and like strategically put them in throughout my documents. So that way, anytime that my tenure committee or my chair or my dean or anyone else had to go through my documents, they would have to be confronted with this, Pikachu giving a critical critique of bureaucracy and how it dehumanizes and alienates workers. So I say all this to say, A, probably don't do that. But B, the thing that I would advise, which again, I hated doing, was documenting everything. I hate giving this advice because I really do think that it's dehumanizing and alienating that we ask faculty to spend so much time documenting their work rather than just letting us do our work. At the same time, recognizing that we are in a time in higher education when we really have to justify our existence and justify the things that we have and then justify the things that we get to do. And the audience for that is not just our tenure committee and our colleagues or even our dean or provost. That can be a board of regents. At this point, it could be some crazy group of people whose really only intention is to comb through your documents in order to figure out, is there something that they can use against you? And so I think it's better to spend the time to document things. And so you might think to yourself, oh, this innovative teaching strategy that I use, this activity that I've created, whatever it might be, that's just good teaching. Nope, it's not just good teaching. It's something that you need to document. Oh, I'm on these committees and yeah, we wrote this report and the university used it. Isn't that great? No, it's not just great. You had a tangible effect on university policy. You need to document that. Oh, I've been on all these thesis or dissertation committees, and that's just something that we do in the department. That's not just something that you do. You document it. Community engagement, op-eds in newspapers, keynote addresses to the local 4-H, whatever it is, right? Like no matter how small it is, you put it in your CV. Now, I say that what you probably don't want to do is have that CV, the one that you use then necessarily to apply for other jobs. Like if I'm on a hiring committee, the fact that you gave a keynote address to 5 people at the local 4-H club 5 years ago, that really doesn't move the needle for me at all in terms of what I'm looking for in a candidate. So the CV that you have here, this is your tenure and or promotion CV, not your I'm going to try to get a job CV. And a lot of folks, they don't realize that. They use the same CV for both, which is why you have some people who are applying for jobs and they have like 20-page CVs. Like that's ridiculous. You don't need to have a 20-page CV. Your job applications, if you are a mid or late career professional, needs to be much more targeted than that. But whenever it comes to for you to go up for tenure or promotion, anything that you can document, you document, because anything that you don't put in doesn't count. And if you're not going to toot your own horn, certainly no one else is. So the last thing I'll say is that what's important for you to remember here is that what a tenure and or promotion dossier is supposed to do is craft a narrative and an argument as to why your institution should invest in you and possibly keep you employed for the rest of your professional career. It's not about convincing the university that you are the best thing since sliced bread. It's not about convincing them that you're a rock star. It's not about convincing them that you are the best. Although if you are, hey man, kudos to you. Congrats on all of your accomplishments. But that's not the point. The point is demonstrating to the university that you have provided consistent value to the institution, and that if it invests in you by giving you tenure or a promotion, that your demonstration of consistent value is one that you will maintain throughout your career. So your consistent value in teaching is that you are a good teacher. You show up on time, your students seem to learn things, haven't been any major complaints about you, your syllabi adhere to university guidelines, your teaching evaluations are largely positive, right? They're not necessarily looking for you to discover some hereunto newfangled way of teaching that absolutely rocks everyone's socks off. Again, if you do, cool, kudos to you. But that's not what you're convincing the university of. You're convincing them that you've been a consistent, valuable presence in the classroom and that you're going to continue to be that way. Same thing with research. You're not convincing them that your work is the most important thing that's ever happened in the history of academia. You're convincing them that the productivity that you have demonstrated is a productivity that you will maintain, if not in that content and form, then at least in terms of output in other ways, that you're going to have some effect on the scholarly conversations in or around your discipline, and that's going to be something that you are consistent about. Same thing with service. You don't have to be on every committee, and you don't have to be the faculty governance chair. You don't have to run some national association. You don't have to be a part of a nonprofit group that saves 1,000 kids from hunger. Again, all those things are worthwhile. And if you do those things, that's great. That's not what the university is looking for. It's looking for, did you show up and contribute your fair share to the governance and organization of the university? Did you serve on committees, and will you continue to serve on committees in a way that promotes rather than inhibits the function of the university? If that's the case, cool. So you're not really proving your worth in your tenure or promotion documents. What you are doing is you are informing your institution of your worth. You know your worth. You are informing them of that worth. You're not proving it to them. Okay. And so by informing them, this is what I've done and will continue to do if given the chance with tenure and or promotion, I think that puts us in a much different mindset where instead of us feeling on some level like we are asking the university to grant us something, no. You're granting it to me from the beginning. I'm just informing you of the reasons why that's a good investment, right? So that's going to about wrap it up for me, folks. I appreciate y'all listening. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have questions, you have things that you want to ask me about, by all means, shoot me an email, reach out to me, contact me. That stuff's in the podcast description. I hope that your summer's going well. We're about halfway through it at this point. It feels like it's been flying by, but hopefully you're still getting some time to relax, hang out with people that you love, walk your dog if you have one, and generally just get to decompress a little bit. Okay. So thank you all for listening, and I will see you in next week's episode. Hey, co-authors, what's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let reviewer 2 get you down.